Sarah opened her eyes slowly, greeted first by the gentle streams of sunlight seeping through the sheer curtains. Stretching lazily, she rolled over, her hand instinctively reaching out toward the empty space beside her. Daniel's side of the bed was cool and unoccupied, signaling that he'd gotten up much earlier. Not unusual, but today, it stirred a peculiar unease. Yawning, she slipped out of bed, feet padding softly across the plush carpet toward the kitchen. As she passed the mirror, Sarah paused, briefly noticing the shadows beneath her eyes, a clear testament to the restless night she'd had. She shook off the feeling, rationalizing it as just another stress-filled day ahead. The scent of coffee wafted through the air, yet the kitchen, too, was empty. Sarah furrowed her brow slightly, wondering briefly where Daniel had gone, but decided to shrug it off, assuming he'd simply gone out for a jog or an early errand. She poured herself a mug of steaming coffee, inhaling deeply and hoping the familiar aroma would chase away her lingering apprehension. Settling onto the soft leather couch, Sarah reached for her phone, instinctively opening her banking app, something she'd done every morning since she'd started her new job. A comforting habit that grounded her in the reality of her hard-earned financial stability. But today, as the familiar screen loaded, her stomach dropped. Her balance read 0. She blinked hard, sure that fatigue was clouding her vision. But no, the glaring emptiness of her account stared defiantly back at her. Heart racing, Sarah frantically refreshed the page, but nothing changed. Panic surged through her veins, causing her hands to tremble uncontrollably. Every cent she had worked so painstakingly to save suddenly vanished without explanation. Breathing rapidly, she checked the transaction history, her anxiety peaking into outright fear. A single transfer, one large, decisive move, had emptied her account entirely. Desperation replaced disbelief as she clicked on the transaction details, searching for some hint or clue as to how this catastrophe had occurred. Her blood ran cold as the details unfolded before her. The transfer had been authenticated with her fingerprint at exactly 3:14 a.m., long before she'd awakened. Confusion mingled with fear. She had no memory of this, no recollection of being awake, let alone authorizing any transaction. Her mind spun wildly. Could she have done this in her sleep? Impossible. It had to be some kind of error, some elaborate hack, but who could have possibly accessed her fingerprint? Her eyes drifted toward the bedroom door, a sinking feeling deepening in her chest. The bed empty, Daniel nowhere to be found. Was it possible? The coffee in her mug went cold, forgotten, as Sarah sat frozen in shock. Daniel had always been trustworthy, or so she'd believed. Doubt twisted painfully in her chest. Her pulse thundered, head spinning with scenarios she desperately tried to dismiss. Yet every piece of logic pointed to the unthinkable. The sound of the front door unlocking snapped her from her stupor. She turned sharply, heart pounding fiercely against her ribs, as Daniel entered quietly, his face oddly composed, unreadable. "Sarah?" he began cautiously, sensing immediately that something was terribly wrong. Her voice shook as she met his eyes, hurt and anger intertwined, making her accusation sharp and undeniable. "Daniel, did you take my money?" He froze, the calm draining from his face as he registered her words, a flicker of something she couldn't quite place passing through his expression. Sarah stood, trembling yet resolute, bracing herself for his response. Daniel stood motionless in the doorway, the key still dangling from his fingers, clinking softly as they trembled in his grip. Sarah watched him closely, her breathing shallow, heart thudding in her chest like a frantic drumbeat. The silence between them stretched painfully, suffocating in its intensity. She expected a reaction, anger, denial, even defiance. But Daniel appeared utterly paralyzed, his face drained of color, eyes wide with a fear she had never before seen in him. Her anger wavered briefly, overtaken by confusion. This wasn't the reaction of someone caught in a simple betrayal. This was pure, undisguised terror. "Daniel, answer me," Sarah demanded sharply, trying desperately to mask the tremor in her voice. "Did you take my money? Did you empty my account using my fingerprint?" He finally moved, stumbling slightly as he stepped forward, his voice barely a whisper. "Sarah, please listen, I can explain. But not here." His eyes darted nervously around the room, landing momentarily on the windows, the door, even the smart speakers sitting innocently on their shelves. Daniel seemed overwhelmed by paranoia, as if they were being watched, or worse, listened to. Sarah's frustration surged anew, her patience thinning with each passing second. "Explain it now, Daniel," she demanded fiercely, stepping toward him, her body rigid with tension. "How could you possibly justify stealing from me? How could you betray me like that?" Daniel flinched visibly at her words, looking as though she'd struck him physically. "You don't understand," he pleaded, his voice shaking. I didn't know. Sarah, someone set us up." Sarah hesitated, taken aback by the sincerity in his tone, yet skepticism tightened its grip around her heart. "Set us up? Daniel, the transfer was made using my fingerprint. At 3 in the morning. I was asleep. Who else could have possibly done it?" Daniel moved cautiously toward her, raising his hands defensively. "It was me," he admitted hoarsely, his gaze locked onto hers, begging for understanding. "I did it, but not for myself." Sarah felt her stomach churn violently, the sting of his betrayal resurfacing sharply. "Then for whom?" she spat, barely containing her disgust and disappointment. "Who could possibly force you into stealing from your own wife?" He paused, his eyes filled with desperation, as if considering how much to reveal. I thought I had no choice," he stammered, running his fingers nervously through his hair, leaving it disheveled. "It was supposed to be simple. They said it was the only way to protect us." Sarah shook her head incredulously, tears prickling her eyes. "Protect us? You're not making any sense, Daniel. Who are they? What could possibly justify something like this?" Daniel's voice cracked, barely audible now, thick with dread. "Your money wasn't just money, Sarah. It was a trigger. They set me up. And I walked right into it." Sarah stared at him, disbelief mixing with anxiety, her mind racing to catch up with the bewildering confession spilling from her husband's lips. "A trigger for what, Daniel? What did you do?" He glanced nervously around once more, visibly panicked. "Sarah, we have to get out of here," he urged urgently, desperation edging into hysteria. "They know we know now. If we stay here, we're not safe." His fear infected her, churning her insides as her anger faltered. For the first time, Sarah began to sense the depth and danger of the betrayal they'd become entangled in, the terrifying uncertainty of what might come next. She stared at Daniel, seeing a stranger in the eyes of the man she had trusted more than anyone else in the world, suddenly uncertain if she truly knew him at all. Sarah's pulse roared loudly in her ears as she and Daniel hurriedly packed essentials into a small overnight bag. Every shadow in their home felt menacing. Every creak of the floorboards heightened the sense of imminent danger. Daniel's paranoia seemed contagious, each nervous glance reinforcing the terrifying reality that their ordinary lives had just been upended. "Talk to me, Daniel," Sarah urged sharply, shoving clothing into the bag with shaking hands. "You need to explain this clearly. What do you mean the money was a trigger? For what?" Daniel zipped the bag roughly, turning toward her, eyes darkened by guilt and anxiety. He swallowed hard, his voice cracking as he spoke. "Sarah, the FBI is involved. They've been watching my business partners for months. They suspected something, but they needed proof, a trigger, to move in. Your account was set as a trap, and I walked straight into it." Sarah's mind spun, confusion mixing with dread. She had known Daniel's business dealings sometimes skirted the edge of legality, but she'd never imagined it could escalate into something like this. "You were working with criminals?" she accused, disbelief clear in her trembling voice. He hesitated, shame flickering in his eyes. "I didn't know, not at first. My partners, they're tied into something much bigger, much darker. Cybercrime, data breaches, laundering. When I realized, it was already too late. They had me cornered. Why didn't you come to me?" Sarah asked, her voice strained with hurt. "You knew I would have helped." Daniel sighed deeply, running his hand through his hair in frustration. "I was scared, Sarah. They threatened you, said they'd hurt you if I spoke out. I thought transferring the money would buy us time, protect you somehow. I didn't realize it would activate the FBI's surveillance net. Sarah felt her knees weaken slightly, and she gripped the edge of the bed for support. You triggered a sting operation, she whispered in shock. And now what? They're going to arrest you? He nodded slowly, looking away. Not just me, all of us. But now, with this triggered, the criminals will realize someone betrayed them. They'll come for me, and they might come for you too. Fear coursed coldly through Sarah's veins, every muscle tightening with urgency. She pushed down the panic, forcing herself into action. We need help, Daniel. The FBI. Can we talk to them? Explain? We could, Daniel admitted, his voice hesitant and weary. But right now, they might not see me as a victim. I transferred the money, remember? They'll think I'm complicit. Sarah bit her lip hard, tasting blood as her anxiety peaked. Then what, run? Hide? Just until we figure out who we can trust, Daniel said urgently, his voice low and intense. There's something else, Sarah. Whoever set this up knows us, knows everything about us. They were counting on us panicking, slipping up. Sarah stared at him, realization dawning heavily upon her. Someone close to us? But who would? Daniel cut her off, grabbing her hand tightly. We don't have time to figure it out now. We have to leave, now. The urgency in his voice left no room for debate. As Sarah followed Daniel toward the door, each step felt heavy with foreboding. Her heart pounded relentlessly, knowing they were stepping into uncertainty, leaving behind a shattered life and heading straight into a storm that had been brewing silently around them for longer than she'd ever imagined. Sarah and Daniel sped through the city streets, the car's interior heavy with oppressive silence, punctuated only by Daniel's anxious breathing and Sarah's rapid heartbeat. Neon lights blurred past them, casting eerie reflections across their tense faces. Every stoplight and intersection seemed like a potential ambush, each passing pedestrian a suspicious figure. Finally, Daniel broke the silence, his voice tight with strain. We can't stay anywhere familiar. Hotels, friends, it's all too risky. Sarah turned to him, her expression stark, exhausted yet fiercely determined. Then where are we going, Daniel? He hesitated, eyes darting between the road and the rearview mirror. There's a safe house. One of my contacts told me about it months ago. It's off the grid, abandoned. I never thought we'd actually need it. The car swerved sharply around a corner, and Sarah steadied herself against the dashboard, her mind racing. You planned for this? Not exactly, Daniel muttered defensively. I was cautious. The people I was dealing with aren't ordinary criminals. They're powerful, influential, dangerous. I just wanted an escape plan, a way out if things went wrong. Sarah gritted her teeth, resentment simmering beneath her fear. Things did go wrong, Daniel. They went terribly wrong. And now we're both caught in the middle. His grip tightened on the steering wheel, knuckles whitening. I know, Sarah. Believe me, I never wanted to involve you in this mess. She sighed, leaning her head back against the seat, closing her eyes briefly as the weight of their situation crashed down upon her. It's too late for regrets now. We need a strategy. How do we survive this? Daniel glanced at her quickly, desperation evident in his eyes. We need information. If we can uncover who's really pulling the strings, maybe we can negotiate with the FBI, offer them something valuable enough to clear us, or at least protect us. How do we do that without exposing ourselves even more? Sarah questioned sharply, frustration evident. He swallowed hard, visibly steeling himself for her reaction. We'll have to reach out to some of my contacts, carefully. They're dangerous, but they're also vulnerable. They'll be scrambling now, trying to cover their tracks. That might make them reckless, sloppy. We just need to watch closely, stay ahead of them. Sarah felt a surge of unease ripple through her, her pulse quickening at the prospect of diving deeper into this perilous underworld. And you trust these contacts, after everything that's happened? Trust? No, Daniel answered bitterly. But right now, we don't have the luxury of trust. We only have mutual desperation. The truth of his words hung heavily between them, emphasizing the precariousness of their situation. Sarah's fingers clenched tightly around her seatbelt, fighting the rising tide of panic. Each mile carried them further into uncertainty, each passing second deepening the stakes. "We're playing a dangerous game, Daniel," she murmured, her voice barely audible above the hum of the engine. "And we're betting everything we have left." Daniel's expression hardened, eyes fixed grimly on the road ahead. "I know, but it's the only way out now." They drove onward into the darkness, their resolve barely masking their fear, plunging deeper into a web of deceit where trust was scarce and survival uncertain. Sarah sat rigidly on the edge of the worn sofa in the dimly lit safe house, the flickering light from a single bare bulb casting ghostly shadows across the cracked walls. Daniel paced anxiously nearby, repeatedly checking the boarded-up windows, paranoia thickening with every passing minute. The room was heavy with the scent of mildew, amplifying the suffocating atmosphere of secrecy and danger. "Daniel, please," Sarah implored, her voice strained with exhaustion. "Stop pacing and sit. You're making me dizzy." He paused abruptly, guilt evident in his tired eyes. With a heavy sigh, he sank onto the chair across from her, head in his hands. "I'm sorry, Sarah. I never wanted this. Any of this." "Neither did I," she whispered, bitterness edging her voice. "But we're here now. We need to find out who's behind this before it's too late." Daniel nodded slowly, hesitation flickering in his eyes. "There's something else," he began cautiously, watching her reaction closely. "I've been trying to piece it together, figure out who could be behind all this. I think it might be someone close to us." Sarah felt a chill ripple down her spine, dread tightening its grip on her chest. "What do you mean, someone close?" she demanded, voice edged with suspicion. "Who?" Daniel swallowed hard, reluctance clear on his face. "Your sister, Lauren," he finally admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. Shock surged through Sarah like a wave of icy water, leaving her breathless. "Lauren?" she echoed incredulously, her voice shaking with disbelief and betrayal. "Daniel, that's absurd. She's family. She couldn't do this." He held her gaze firmly, the severity in his eyes impossible to dismiss. "Sarah, I've seen the evidence. My contacts traced transactions, communications." Her name kept coming up. At first, I thought it was coincidence, but the deeper I dug, the clearer it became. Lauren orchestrated this. She's pulling the strings. Sarah's mind reeled, refusing to accept the devastating possibility. Her thoughts raced back through memories of their childhood, shared secrets, whispered confidences, endless nights comforting each other through life's storms. How could the sister she loved so deeply betray her so profoundly? "But why?" Sarah asked weakly, her voice barely audible over the storm of emotions raging within her. "Lauren has always been there for me. Why would she do this?" Daniel shook his head slowly, regret heavy in his voice. "I'm not sure yet, but whatever her reasons, they're rooted deeply enough to justify risking both our lives." Sarah leaned back heavily against the sofa, tears stinging her eyes. A sense of isolation overwhelmed her, as though her entire life had been torn apart, leaving only betrayal and heartache. "I trusted her," she whispered, her voice trembling with sorrow. "I trusted both of you." Daniel reached for her hand, gripping it tightly. "Sarah, I swear to you, I never wanted to betray you. Lauren manipulated all of us. She's dangerous, more than either of us realized." Sarah closed her eyes tightly, gathering her strength. The ache of betrayal still fresh, but something hardened inside her, determination rising to meet the pain. She opened her eyes again, newfound resolve sharpening her gaze. "Then we need answers. We have to confront Lauren, find out what she wants, and end this nightmare." Daniel nodded solemnly, standing again to check the window cautiously. "We'll find her, Sarah, but we have to be careful. She's been ahead of us every step of the way." Sarah rose slowly, determination solidifying within her, overshadowing the hurt, betrayal, and fear. "Then it's time we change the game." Together they prepared to face an enemy hidden within their own family, each step forward filled with trepidation and resolve, knowing nothing would ever be the same again. The drive to confront Lauren was silent, the weight of unspoken fears and questions suffocating in the confined space of the car. The city blurred past, illuminated by neon signs and headlights, as tension thickened between Sarah and Daniel. Each mile closer to Lauren felt like an approaching storm, its shadows darkening Sarah's thoughts with dread and uncertainty. When they reached Lauren's elegant suburban home, the comforting facade of familiarity seemed hauntingly deceptive. Sarah hesitated at the front gate, her heart heavy with disbelief and apprehension. Daniel gently touched her shoulder, his eyes filled with compassion and shared dread. "Are you ready for this?" he asked softly, concern evident in his voice. Sarah inhaled deeply, steeling herself against the turmoil within. "I need answers," she responded, her tone resolute despite the turmoil beneath the surface. "Whatever Lauren has done, I deserve to know why." They approached the front door, their footsteps crunching ominously on the gravel pathway. Sarah raised her hand to knock but hesitated, overwhelmed by a wave of nausea. Daniel gave her hand a reassuring squeeze, encouraging her to continue. Her knuckles rapped lightly, the sound echoing hollowly through the night. The door swung open slowly, revealing Lauren standing calmly in the foyer, her face illuminated by the warm glow of the hallway lights. Her composed demeanor sent chills down Sarah's spine. "Sarah," Lauren greeted smoothly, a hint of a smile playing on her lips. "Daniel, I've been expecting you." Sarah stepped inside cautiously, her gaze never leaving her sister's unreadable expression. The warmth of the home felt alien, sharply contrasting with the chill radiating from Lauren's presence. "We need to talk, Lauren," Sarah asserted, her voice firm but strained with suppressed emotion. Lauren gestured gracefully toward the living room. "Then let's talk." Sarah and Daniel sat stiffly on the plush couch, tension crackling in the air. Lauren took a seat opposite them, her posture elegant and controlled. She regarded them thoughtfully, an unsettling calmness in her eyes. "Why, Lauren?" Sarah finally demanded, unable to contain her pain any longer. "We're sisters. How could you betray me like this?" Lauren's lips curled slightly, revealing an unsettling blend of sorrow and triumph. "Oh, Sarah, you've always been so naive," she began softly, her tone dripping with condescension. "I never intended to hurt you personally. You were simply the perfect pawn." Sarah felt a surge of anger mingled with hurt. "A pawn? For what? Money? Revenge?" Lauren's gaze hardened, bitterness edging her voice. "You always had everything. Success, love, stability. Meanwhile, I lived in your shadow, always second best. But it wasn't just envy, Sarah. You became useful. Your job, your connections, they were exactly what I needed." Sarah's breath quickened, her voice shaking with shock and disbelief. "Needed for what?" Lauren leaned forward slightly, eyes gleaming coldly. "The money Daniel transferred was never truly yours. It was a carefully laid trap. You see, sister, your fingerprints weren't just used for your account. They've also implicated you in something far worse." Sarah's blood ran cold. "What are you talking about?" Lauren's smile widened chillingly. "A murder, Sarah. A murder you never committed, but that won't matter when they find your fingerprints at the scene. You're now officially a wanted criminal." Sarah felt the world tilt dangerously around her, a wave of nausea threatening to overwhelm her senses. "Why are you doing this, Lauren?" Lauren's expression softened briefly, genuine sadness flickering in her eyes. "Because I had no other choice," she murmured cryptically. "You'll understand soon enough." Daniel stood abruptly, tension radiating from him in palpable waves. "This isn't over, Lauren," he warned, his voice tight with anger. Lauren merely smiled, her eyes cold and calculating. "No, Daniel. It's only just begun." Sarah rose unsteadily, gripping Daniel's arm for support, her resolve shaken but not shattered. The dark truth had unraveled before them, exposing an intricate web of deception and betrayal that threatened to engulf them completely. Sarah and Daniel raced away from Lauren's house, their minds and hearts pounding in tandem with the urgency of their escape. Darkness cloaked their path, streetlights offering little comfort as paranoia tightened its suffocating grip around them. Sarah's thoughts spun chaotically, the echo of Lauren's revelation reverberating mercilessly through her consciousness. Daniel maneuvered the car sharply through side streets, frequently checking the mirrors, every shadow seemingly harboring an unseen threat. Sarah sat silently, hands clenched tightly in her lap, fighting the wave of dread threatening to drown her. "We have to find somewhere safe," Daniel said, his voice strained. They'll come looking for us soon. Sarah turned toward him, fear etched deeply into her face. Daniel, where can we possibly go? Everywhere will be watched. He hesitated, jaw tightening. There's an old cabin my family used to own. It's secluded, abandoned. No one else knows about it. It's our best shot. Sarah nodded mutely, clutching at any semblance of hope. As city streets gave way to winding rural roads, the tension never eased, each mile amplifying their vulnerability. Finally, the isolated cabin emerged from the darkness, hidden among dense trees, its weathered facade blending seamlessly into the night. Inside, the stale air of neglect met them harshly, mingling with the lingering scent of forgotten memories. Daniel secured the door, pulling faded curtains across the windows, enveloping them in uneasy privacy. Sarah sank heavily onto an old wooden chair, exhaustion and despair pressing heavily upon her shoulders. Lauren planned this perfectly, she whispered, her voice brittle. She framed me for murder, Daniel, murder! He knelt before her, placing gentle hands on her knees, urgency blazing in his eyes. We can still prove your innocence. There's a way out. Lauren isn't infallible. She'll have made mistakes. Sarah shook her head, despair battling hope. How can we fight this? My fingerprints at the crime scene. It's damning evidence. Daniel's determination hardened. We retrace everything Lauren has done. She's left a trail. We just have to find it. If we uncover her true intentions, her mistakes, we might be able to turn the tables. Sarah's gaze locked onto his, strength returning in small, cautious increments. Then we start immediately. Every second counts. As they began meticulously analyzing every interaction, every exchange, Sarah realized how intricately Lauren had woven her deceit, manipulating events far beyond their awareness. Documents, records, and subtle clues pointed toward a vast conspiracy, a complex web designed to isolate and incriminate her completely. Hours blurred together, fatigue pressing heavily upon them both, but neither dared to rest. As dawn approached, a subtle noise outside broke their fragile concentration. Daniel froze, immediately tense. Did you hear that? He whispered sharply. Sarah nodded slowly, pulse quickening. Silence returned, but their sense of vulnerability had intensified. Daniel moved cautiously to the window, peeking carefully through the curtain. His body stiffened. They've found us, he murmured grimly. We have to move now. Sarah's heart thundered, adrenaline surging fiercely. Without hesitation, they quickly gathered their sparse belongings and prepared for another desperate escape. The cabin door burst open suddenly, splintering loudly, as shadowy figures emerged into the faint morning light. Daniel grabbed Sarah's hand urgently, pulling her toward the back entrance, every step frantic, driven by raw instinct and survival. We'll find a way, Daniel whispered fiercely, determination masking his fear. We'll fight this, Sarah. Together. Sarah held tightly to his hand, letting his resolve bolster her own. As they fled into the wilderness, hunted and framed, hope flickered faintly within her, a small, resilient ember amidst a sea of darkness. Sarah and Daniel stumbled through the dense forest, the early morning mist curling around them like a ghostly shroud. The sound of their pursuers faded slowly behind them, but neither dared to slow their frantic pace. Branches tore at their clothing, scratching their exposed skin, leaving raw reminders of their desperate flight. Finally, they paused in a small clearing, chests heaving, their breaths visible in the crisp morning air. Daniel bent over, bracing his hands against his knees, gasping for air. Sarah leaned against a tree, eyes darting anxiously around, every shadow and rustle raising fresh alarms. We can't keep running blind, Sarah said breathlessly, voice tight with strain. We need a plan. Daniel nodded grimly, wiping sweat and dirt from his forehead. We'll need allies, someone outside Lauren's influence. But the question is, who? Sarah's mind raced through her contacts, former colleagues, old friends. Each face that surfaced brought fresh doubts. Lauren's betrayal had shattered her ability to trust, turning everyone into a potential enemy. How can we trust anyone now? She whispered hoarsely, her voice laced with bitterness. Daniel moved closer, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. We have to take that risk, Sarah. Isolation will only make us easier targets. There must be someone Lauren hasn't reached. Sarah closed her eyes briefly, desperate to sift through the chaos in her mind. A familiar name slowly emerged, lighting a cautious spark of hope. Detective Matthews, she murmured thoughtfully, opening her eyes to meet Daniel's uncertain gaze. He was always loyal. He warned me about Lauren once, long ago. Maybe he'll listen. Daniel hesitated, doubt etched clearly into his tired expression. Are you sure involving the police could backfire? Matthews could be compromised too. Sarah bit her lip, weighing the risks carefully. He's our best chance, Daniel. If we can't trust Matthews, we truly have no one. Reluctantly, Daniel nodded, surrendering to the grim necessity of the gamble. Then we'll contact him carefully. But we have to be smart. Lauren's surveillance might still be in place. Together, they cautiously navigated their way toward the outskirts of town, using back roads and alleys to remain unnoticed. Each step felt heavy with potential disaster, tension humming sharply between them as fear tightened its relentless grip. Using a payphone, Sarah dialed Matthew's number from memory, her hand trembling. The call connected, and a gruff, familiar voice answered. Matthews. Sarah took a shaky breath. Detective, it's Sarah. I need your help, urgently. A pause, tense and unsettling, followed her words. Finally, Matthews replied quietly, caution evident in his voice. Sarah, I know what's happening. We need to meet. But carefully. Can you trust Daniel? Sarah's blood chilled at his question, her gaze flickering toward Daniel, who watched her with wary concern. Doubt surged fiercely, but she forced it down, determined to trust her instincts. Yes, she replied firmly, praying silently that her conviction wasn't misplaced. Then meet me at the old train depot tonight at midnight, Matthews instructed swiftly, his tone brooking no argument. Be careful. You're both in more danger than you realize. As Sarah replaced the phone receiver, unease twisted painfully within her, Matthew's warning ringing ominously in her ears. Daniel's eyes searched hers desperately for reassurance. What did he say? Sarah hesitated, momentarily unable to voice her fears. He agreed to help, she finally replied, her voice strained yet resolute. But something's off, Daniel. He knows more than he let on. We need to be cautious. Daniel nodded slowly, tension etched deeply into his face. Trust, already fragile, strained beneath the weight of uncertainty and hidden truths. As they prepared for yet another dangerous encounter, their alliance was tested to its limits, each desperately hoping their trust wasn't about to be fatally betrayed. The abandoned train depot loomed ominously in the midnight darkness, its rusting metal and weathered brick casting sinister shadows beneath the pale moonlight. Sarah and Daniel approached cautiously, each footstep echoing hollowly through the silent, empty spaces. The air felt charged with foreboding, tension winding tightly around their chests. Sarah's pulse quickened as Detective Matthews emerged from the darkness, his figure illuminated faintly by a flickering street lamp. He stood rigidly, alert, eyes scanning their surroundings before finally settling on Sarah with an unreadable expression. Sarah, Matthews said gravely, nodding in cautious greeting. His gaze flickered warily toward Daniel. Daniel? Sarah moved closer, her voice firm despite her anxiety. Detective, please, tell us what you know. Matthews hesitated, visibly troubled, before finally responding. Lauren planned everything meticulously. She wanted revenge, Sarah, but it runs deeper than just sibling rivalry. Your sister's vendetta stems from a dark secret your family has buried for decades. Sarah's chest tightened painfully. What secret? Matthews sighed deeply, reluctance evident in every line of his face. Your parents weren't the perfect figures you believed. Years ago, they were involved in fraudulent dealings, criminal enterprises that harmed many innocent lives. Lauren discovered the truth and blamed your family's deception for her hardships. But rather than confronting them, she chose you as the target of her vengeance. Sarah staggered slightly, absorbing the revelation with difficulty. Memories of her parents' apparent virtue and kindness suddenly twisted painfully, tainted by Matthew's shocking disclosure. She blamed me? I knew nothing about it. Matthews nodded solemnly. She saw you as benefiting from the deceit. Your success, happiness, Lauren viewed it all as stolen from her. This betrayal has consumed her. Daniel stepped forward urgently, his voice strained. How can we stop her, Matthews? She's framed Sarah for murder. There has to be a way to expose her. Matthew's expression hardened grimly. Lauren's careful, but she's not infallible. She's made mistakes, left traces. I've gathered some evidence that could exonerate Sarah, but it's incomplete. We need Lauren to confess or slip up again. Sarah straightened, a determined gleam returning to her eyes. Then we confront her directly, force her hand. If she believes she's winning, she might reveal something we can use. Daniel frowned, anxiety clear in his expression. It's risky, Sarah. Lauren's dangerous. Sarah met Daniel's gaze unwaveringly. We have no choice. Lauren won't stop until she's destroyed everything I care about. Facing her is our only hope. Matthews nodded slowly, approval mixed with caution in his gaze. If you're going through with this, we must plan carefully. Lauren will anticipate your move. You must be prepared for any outcome. Sarah felt resolve solidify within her, strengthened by Matthew's support and Daniel's quiet, tense determination. We're ready, detective. Tell us what we need to do. As Matthews began outlining their strategy, Sarah realized this confrontation with Lauren would test her in every way imaginable, emotionally, physically, and morally. She had to remain strong, facing not just her sister, but the painful truth of her family's past. Hours later, as the first light of dawn broke the horizon, Sarah stood prepared, heart steeled against fear, betrayal, and sorrow. The moment had come to confront Lauren, face to face, in a battle of truths and deceptions that would determine the rest of her life. She only hoped her strength, and the fragile alliance she'd built, would hold firm against the storm. The early morning sun rose reluctantly, casting pale, uncertain rays through the dense mist enveloping the city. Sarah stood motionless in the deserted park, the agreed-upon meeting point. Every nerve in her body hummed with tension, her breathing steady despite the wild flutter of her pulse. Daniel waited nearby, hidden from sight, ready to intervene at the first sign of danger. Footsteps crunched softly on the gravel path, drawing Sarah's gaze sharply toward the approaching figure. Lauren emerged slowly from the lingering fog, her expression composed yet guarded, eyes gleaming coldly with suppressed emotions. Sarah, Lauren greeted coolly, a faint, sardonic smile curving her lips. I didn't think you'd have the courage to face me alone. Sarah met Lauren's gaze unflinchingly, determined to mask her internal turmoil. I deserve answers, Lauren. Why this elaborate revenge? Why frame me for murder? Our parents' actions weren't my fault. Lauren's gaze darkened, bitterness rising visibly. But you benefited from their lies, Sarah. You had everything handed to you while I suffered in silence, alone and forgotten. Sarah stepped forward slightly, voice steady despite the painful ache within. You chose isolation, Lauren. You chose hatred. It never had to be this way. Lauren's expression faltered momentarily, raw pain flashing briefly across her face before hardening once more. You don't understand. I never had a choice. I needed justice, real justice. Sarah's voice softened slightly, compassion edging her words. This isn't justice, Lauren. This is revenge, and it's destroying both of us. Lauren laughed bitterly, shaking her head. No, Sarah. You destroyed me long ago. Now it's your turn. Suddenly, Lauren raised her hand, revealing a small pistol concealed in her grasp. Sarah froze, heart hammering violently, eyes locked on the deadly weapon. Lauren, Sarah pleaded urgently, desperation clear in her voice. Don't do this, it's not too late. Lauren's hand trembled slightly, uncertainty flickering in her eyes. It was always too late, she whispered painfully, for both of us. A sudden movement burst from the shadows as Daniel lunged forward, tackling Lauren, sending the weapon skidding across the gravel. Chaos erupted in the quiet morning, the scuffle desperate and violent, each moment thick with danger and fear. Sarah scrambled desperately for the fallen weapon, fingers brushing its cold surface just as Matthews arrived, shouting authoritative commands, gun drawn. Lauren stilled beneath Daniel's grip, the fight draining from her, leaving her hollow and defeated. Matthews approached cautiously, swiftly disarming Lauren and securing her wrists. It's over, Lauren, he said firmly, a note of weary relief in his voice. Lauren looked up at Sarah, her gaze filled with exhaustion and profound sorrow. I just wanted you to feel my pain, she murmured brokenly. Sarah knelt beside her sister, heart aching deeply. "We both lost something today, Lauren. But it didn't have to end like this." Lauren offered no reply, the silence heavy with remorse and regret. Sarah stood slowly, feeling the weight of all she'd endured, pressing heavily upon her shoulders. But as Matthews moved Lauren away, a chilling sensation prickled at Sarah's senses. She turned sharply, meeting Daniel's gaze, suddenly aware of something deeply unsettling in his expression. Daniel smiled softly, yet his eyes were cold, calculating. "I'm sorry, Sarah," he murmured quietly, voice disturbingly calm. "You were always the perfect pawn." Sarah stared at him, disbelief and horror crashing over her as the truth crystallized painfully. Daniel had never been a victim. He had manipulated every event, orchestrating her downfall meticulously. "You?" Sarah whispered, devastated and betrayed. He stepped back slowly, nodding gently. "I had to, Sarah. You stood in my way for too long. But don't worry," he said with chilling calmness, turning to leave. "We'll meet again." Sarah stood numbly, her world unraveling entirely as Daniel vanished into the mist. But deep within the turmoil, a fierce resolve ignited, her final thought echoing powerfully. This betrayal would not go unanswered.